So we're going to call the meeting, and I'm going to turn it over to the moderator.
Thank you, Karen. Without objection, we'll accept the agenda as published. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes of December 9, please? So moved. Second, please. Any corrections, additions? Okay, all those in favor of accepting the minutes, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? If you have abstentions, you can leave them with the secretary. Now we have some new members. Karen, do you have the new members? We have. All right. Everybody has been sworn in that have that are new members have just joined. We have tonight with us Jessica Casey and Tom Madden. Jessica Casey from the City of Norwalk, the Chief of Economic and Community Development, and Tom Madden, the Director of Economic Development for the City of Stamford. And I suggested to them about 10 minutes, and then I'd leave 5 minutes for questions. So we'll go with that. So since Tom has got his computer set up here, and we don't want to touch it or move it or do anything to it, we'll introduce Tom first. Tom?
It's working this year. All right. So thank you. This is what, my 5th year now coming to talk to everybody here. Move that up a little bit. There we go. Every year we sort of give you a little synopsis of your neighbors nearby, of what's going on. Last year I talked a lot about the development. We've got the $6 billion worth of development that's happening in Stamford. We're one of the only cities that has 5 cranes up right now. We're about to have our 6th and potentially 7th go up. We have a lot of building going on right now. What's interesting, I want to talk a little bit really about the region. And what's interesting is I've been working with a lot of the site selectors to talk about our regional story. And just to sort of see like the economic trends in the area. I just threw up some numbers here. It's really just sort of giving some comparisons, and that's what we really have to start doing. You don't have to take pictures. I have the presentation ready for everybody. We'll be able to hand this out, okay? So just you can pay attention, best way to do this. So when you look, what's interesting is when you actually look at Fairfield County, Dutchess and Putnam, just in the Orange Rockland, Westchester County area, our populations, we're very close to Westchester County, but when you add Orange Rockland a little bit more. But what's interesting is when you start looking at our population growth. So in Fairfield County, we've had a 4.4% population growth. Dutchess Putnam has actually lost people, and Orange Rockland has had a 3.9% growth. But when you compare that to the overall United States growth rate at 7.6%, it sort of shows that we're lagging behind in what's happening in the rest of the country. GDP just in the billions for Fairfield County, $98 billion. Dutchess Putnam, $16 billion, and Orange Rockland, Westchester at $118 billion. What's interesting, though, is when you actually get down to medium household income. $90,000 roughly for Fairfield County. Orange, Rockland, Westchester, it's $83,000, with Orange and Rockland, of course, pulling it down compared to Westchester. But overall, Connecticut, we're at $74,000. So we are a high medium income area. Medium home prices, Fairfield County on average is about $400,000. I'm going to show you a little bit later here, next slide, what Darien actually is. And then Connecticut is $260,000. So overall, when you actually look at Connecticut and this area, we are fairly affordable within pockets of the area. And that's really important when we start talking about our overall workforce and labor force that we have. What's very interesting, though, is my last one I just put up there, is that population that have a BA or greater in terms of their degrees. 47% in Fairfield County. Orange Rockland is 43%. Dutchess Putnam is 35%. We have one of the most educated populations in the country in this area. And so when we actually go to look at our corporations and we try to bring our companies in, that is one of the stats that we throw out there constantly. So the big talk always is what's happening with the housing market. And, you know, we've had a little bit of a stagnant market since the Great Recession. Interesting is, it's better when you have the slides. I was hoping for a bigger projector, but just in Stamford, we've seen a 7% increase just in our sales of housing alone. When you look at Darien, you've had a -9. But overall, with the unit quarterly sales, 2018 was 55 homes in Darien, 50 this year. Stamford was 168 with 180 sales. Norwalk was 161 in 2018, and then last year was 147. But what's interesting is that we've actually seen a 4% uptick in home sales for the first time in a year and a half, as well as an increase in prices in this area. And that's some really good news, because I've seen roughly about 5 years worth of either stagnant or dropping sales. And so that's sort of showing that we are starting to get a little bit of a turnaround in this area. We rank a lot of this by the upper end in what Greenwich is doing, and they're starting to see a bit of a recovery in that higher end housing, which then starts to translate back into Darien and the Fairfield Westport market as well. We actually saw a lot of positive movement in the sales and pricing over the year. What's interesting in that is it's really attributing to all those beautiful apartments that you're seeing being built in Stamford. We're actually, getting those people out of those apartments and actually into houses. They like the area. They start to look at Glendale, Springbrook, along Hope Street, things along there, and they're actually starting to buy a lot more of the homes in those areas. So what's going to be interesting with the 2020 census study is the change in overall for the median ages in these areas. A lot of those areas were were on the older side, and unfortunately people are passing away or retiring and moving out, and we haven't seen a lot more of the younger families now moving in, which is helping us sort of reevaluate our school system and how many more schools that we do need in the area. So just our commercial market, we are roughly about 1.2 million square feet of leasing last year just in Stamford. That is 16.5 million square feet of office space we actually have there, which is off the charts when you actually compare us to a lot of other municipalities of our size. We have a lot of commercial. What's interesting is just in sort of the quarter 3, quarter 4, Diageo is now coming back to Stamford. They left Norwalk, and they split the company up, and they put part of it into Stamford and the other part down in New York City. What's interesting, talking with all of the Diageo office are actually going to probably put more people into the Stamford office because a lot of people didn't want to make that commute down to New York City. What's interesting is all the big buildings around the train station, so the old UBS building is almost completely full. I think they have about 60,000 square feet less, with WWE now moving in there, taking over a majority of the building. The RBS building is 96% occupied. So, again, there's a lot of stuff on the market going, Stanford's, empty, but it's actually not. So out of that 16.5 million square feet, we actually have, it's about 900,000 square feet that is either occupied or under construction, and it's sort of it's skewing our numbers a little bit. When you take out that space that is either getting changed over, we actually drop down to, it's about an 18-19% vacancy rate. But like I said, we have a couple buildings that are going to get converted over to senior assisted living. We have one big building that has actually a school in it right now, so it can't be rented out. And we have a couple other buildings that are being transitioned out of the market. So what's interesting as well is we've started to see an increase in the number of building sales. And we had about 7 major buildings that were sold last year. Of course, the largest one was the RBS building that was sold to Rubenstein Partners for $163 million. And we started to see a lot of the other buildings starting to pick up. We're seeing new investment coming in from New York City. They sort of see this as an opportunity to get in on the ground floor of Stamford with all this new development that is happening. So one of the things we talk to a lot of the companies about, and this is where the surrounding municipalities sort of help us out, and we call it the Greater Stamford region. When you look at that 60-minute drive to Stamford, we have a population of about 11.2 million people. It's about a 5.4 million workforce that we have access to in this area. So as we start to draw companies in and people in, they start to look in the area and they start to actually buy the homes and move into the area, which helps us out. The big thing we talk about is just our access to talent. And this is where a lot of the municipalities around us, like Darien and Norwalk and Wilton, New Canaan, Greenwich, really help us out. And so when you look at the businesses just in the area, it's about 400,000 people that work in the businesses, total employees, it's at 5.4 million. Our unemployment rate, actually, I just got the new number, we're down to 2.9%. So unemployment at 2.9 is excellent for the area. However, it is terrible for trying to recruit companies because they're looking for a higher unemployment rate so they can say, oh, we can get more people to come in and work for us. So that's where we have to draw upon the greater region to bring more people in to help fill some of those jobs. As I mentioned before, just within an hour's drive, though that workforce of 5.4 million people, 1.3 have a degree in business management or marketing, another 400,000 in engineering, 230,000 in communications or public relations. And that is great support service for a lot of our companies that really come in. What people don't realize, we have 50 universities located within an hour of Stamford. And when you look at that list there with UConn, Yale, Columbia, Sacred Heart, NYU, Quinnipiac, we've got some big big universities that we draw upon. And what's interesting as well, I like to use that term, interesting, because a lot of these facts I find, people just don't know about them. And so we've actually started at UConn last year a internship residency program. In the residence itself, we are allowing companies to stick their interns into there for the summer. So they have a nice safe place to go live. They have easy access to the downtown, easy access to the companies. And this, we pretty much sold out last year. I suspect we're going to be sold out again this year in terms of the space. That's 300 odd beds that we're using just right there. And so again, that is a sort of a plus for our companies as they start to recruit the talent that we need in this area. We just announced 3 weeks ago that Stamford will be the home of the Governor's Innovation Fellowship. Through the Stamford Next, which is a part of our innovation district, we'll be giving out a $5,000 honorarium to our fellows. And so we're trying to get 20 fellows in right now who will then work with the companies, and that will get matched by the company for $10,000 total if you stay in Stamford for 2 years. And so we're trying to attract that talent to come into the area, like the area, and stay in the area. Big thing that we have when you look at a lot of the companies in specialist areas are supporting ecosystems. Very, very important as you try to attract companies and try to bring other companies in the area, but also just to support the companies that are located within the Fairfield County region. So marketing and branding, we're starting to see a lot of these companies go more into sort of being agnostic in a way. And so that way they can jump from one company to another company to work on their problems. Data analytics is a big one that we're seeing a lot of agnostic companies sort of rolling in and smaller consulting firms. We talked to NatWest Markets. They love actually using this one consulting firm out of Wilton for some of their data analytics, and they're actually shopping around with a bunch of other companies right now to get them in. Of course, consulting, we've got all the big guys here. Executive search, Indeed. As you know, Indeed is running almost about, there's going to be 1,700 people right now. And then, of course, legal and everybody else. The big thing is getting the people into our area. And so as we sort of say, we're the gateway to New England. We have connections through 4 international airports. A lot of people don't realize you can get straight over to Newark right off Amtrak in Stamford. You don't have to go down to JFK or LaGuardia. So we pump that a little bit. If you do get to LaGuardia, we can do it in 35 minutes at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. 5 o'clock flight, no, I probably wouldn't do that. We have been pushing a lot in our area now for making the highways better and trying to get that investment. Our mayor is a proponent of the tolls. Most of the corporations that we have talked to are a proponent of the tolls. Mainly because the tolls will be able to be used for bonding in the future. And that will allow us to start making the upgrades we have to make to 95, which is holding some of our development back, as well as making investments into our train system. Again, when you look at all the train stops along here, all our stations in our little towns, you're looking anywhere from 100 to 180 years old at these stops that have not been upgraded in a long time. And so we're looking at, we need to start spending that money in there. We're working on autonomous shuttles, as I talked about last year. We've got a couple grants in play. We're working with Yukon, and we will be hosting a autonomous vehicle connected car conference probably in June, or if not, it's going to be October. We're just in the planning stages right now. So again, we're really looking towards the future, just in terms of our transportation and making sure we have those connections. We have some great incentives. You know, we have 5 opportunity zones. And so when President Trump put out the call and said, listen, we're going to make investments back into the communities through the opportunity zones, and if you have an opportunity fund, you can either invest into real estate development, you can invest into companies, or you can invest into power projects. And what we're looking at, we've pretty much got 5 great zones all in the downtown where all the development's happening, and we're starting to see a lot more activity. Now, what's interesting is we're not, as Stamford, we're not actually encouraging the development side of the real estate portion of this. We're actually looking at the investment into companies. So if you have a small startup, instead of doing a Series A, you can actually take opportunity zone funds to make investment into that company. And so we are really promoting that. We have end of February, we'll be at a couple of different co-working spaces to promote this with 3 funds that have signed up to say, we're willing to make those investments into our area. We have a strong outreach into New York City now to say, why be a small fish in a big pond when you can be a big fish in a much smaller pond and get access to a lot of that money that you're looking for to grow. If you'd like to see more about our incentive zones, again, I showed last year, I think I walked a lot through the Choose Stamford website, but Choose Stamford, it's got all of the, if you go into research and marketing, you can see all the development that we are doing and what's happening within the city itself. You click on the bottom link on the research and marketing, you actually can go to our quarterly reports and actually see what's happening on with that. We're very proud of a lot of our companies. You'll see up there a lot of the companies that we have. We have over 90 companies headquartered in Stamford. 60 of those companies are $100 million in profit or more every year. And so we are continually trying to make sure we keep them there and also to expand them. So part of what we've talked about is, you know, I think I've talked about the last 5 years, we talked about our 2002 master plan, which was a high growth model plan. And that's been really the positive key to our success, is that growth in there. We've been the fastest growing city in all of Connecticut, 6.67%. We became the 2nd largest city at 131,000 by our estimates. Census, I filed they said we actually lost 75 people, and I had to point out to them that, well, we opened up 1,200 new apartments last year. I don't know how we lost 75 people, so they're recalculating that for us. But when you look at it since 2009, over 6,000 new housing units that we've built in 40 developments. There's 1,500 housing units currently under construction right now, with another 3,200 units that have been proposed in another 14 buildings. You know, we continue to see companies expanding. Semaphore is just added 400 new people to Stamford, and they took additional space down at, well, One Star Point, but 333 Ludlow. But they also moved in now on Harbor Landing, and they're going to put 300 programmers in there. So Semaphore, if people don't know that company, it is the genomics unit of Mount Sinai Hospital. It's the for-profit side. And these guys are just computer geeks. They are doing nothing but programming the genome for everything on this stuff. And so it's really interesting with what the modeling that they're doing over there. Of course, Charter, you see the construction crane up for the first building. They are now infilling that building, and they will start construction, I think, by summertime on the 2nd building there. So you'll see 2 big glass buildings at the train station. Indeed, of course, expanded out again. Gardner, they took over the Damon Worldwide building. PricewaterhouseCoopers has come in with another 400 people. Hinkle just added another 250. KPMG moved right next to the train station, and that's another 110 that they're adding in. They took a whole floor there. What attracts a lot of people into Stamford, and especially this region, is really our lifestyle. And we have the distinct neighborhoods. We've got great surrounding municipalities that help us out. Just in Stamford alone, in the downtown, we have 110 restaurants, 200 eclectic restaurants sort of throughout, over 300 when you start to include some of the delis in there. Our big motto when we go down to Brooklyn constantly is, basically cube to kayak in 5 minutes. And so we really try to promote our waterfront lifestyle with everybody there. And it's been very successful because we've been bringing a couple companies up, the smaller ones, and we basically prove out our fact. We time it, drive over, and I've got 2 kayaks and a paddleboard sitting there, and let's go out. So it's been a lot of fun with that. Events, everybody's got lots of events. Mill River Park has been wonderful. They have the Food Truck Festival. If you haven't been to the Food Truck Festival there, it's about 5,000 people that show up just for that on each day. Harbor Fest, which is actually held on the same day, gets about 5,000 people. So you think about it, we have 2 major events in Stamford that are attracting 10,000 people to show up into the city right then and there. So again, cultural, we all have our great cultural stuff, the Palace Theater and Museum and Nature Center. If you want some great maple syrup, and I'm putting my plug in for the Museum and Nature Center right now, you can sponsor a bucket for maple syrup up there right now. And they're looking for donations on that. I just bought mine, so I'm looking forward to getting my little bottle of maple syrup off this. But again, we look at the cultural destinations. It's really the surrounding region, and that's what we try to promote here. So we talk about the Maritime Aquarium. We talk about the Bruce Museum, Stepping Stones. We think of ourselves not just as Stamford, but really the region itself. And it's been very hard over the last few years to try to get everybody on the same page. The mayor started the Fairfield Fives, which is Greenwich, Stamford, Norwalk, Westport, and Fairfield. And it's trying to tell our story to the world out there. Because I think the mayor puts it best is when you have a CEO from a major European company coming in, they're going to pick an area. They want to know they want to be in the Northeast. The question is do I want to be in New York City? Do I want to be over New Jersey, Westchester? Do you want to come up to Fairfield? Then it's our job to get them to come in here and understand why they need to be here. So, we're health conscious, of course. We've got some great hospitals in the area between Yale, New Haven, and of course Stamford Hospital. We're proud of our Vita Health District around the hospital. This is a lower income area that we actually created a health district that has a farm on-site, an urban farm, and that we're giving out food as well as free medical care to the surrounding community. Our 40 parks, and I always like to point out the 400-acre Mianna State Park. Everybody forgets that place. If you've not been to Mianna State Park, we encourage you to go take a look at it. And now I'll finish up. So if you'd like to get in touch with me, or you'd like to learn more, choosestamford.com. We push everybody to that website. We get about 1,000 unique visits every year, or every month on this one, and they come from all over the world. And when we did some advertising on the Delta Sky magazine, it was amazing to see that we were getting hits from Japan, India, South America, because we had these magazines all over wherever Delta flew. So again, if you want to know anything that's happening that I didn't quite cover totally in my short time here, choosestamford.com's got everything. Thank you.
Tom graciously said that he would accept a few questions. Are there some questions anybody had? Yes, Jan?
I live at the RTM.
Jana, you use the mic because then everybody can hear.
We're on TV, it's...
I thought my voice was loud enough. I'm new to the RTM this year, and so you may have gone over this last year or other years, or maybe everyone knows. What's going to happen with the mall?
So the mall itself has been up for sale, and most people, you have Tubman and UBS, which actually owns the mall. You have the City of Stamford, which owns the parking structure inside the mall. You have the URC, which I'm the executive director of, which owns the ramps and part of the parking structure and the streets around it. You have Macy's that owns its own pad site. And you have SL Green Rexon, which owns all the office buildings that are attached to the mall. That actually is up for sale as well. And so we've had quite a few companies come through to take a tour of the mall. There are some pending offers right now. I can't say how many, but there's a few that have made offers on the mall itself. The city is getting ready for any type of new proposal that will come in to the mall itself. Now, What's interesting is when you read The Advocate, you would think that retail is failing all over Stamford. The sky is falling. So we went and did some fact checking on this stuff. Right now, the mall is 83% occupied, okay? So 83% occupancy is pretty good, 17% vacancy. Our downtown retail, we just got the final numbers in. I had said less than 10%. We're actually less than 6% vacant. Our Hope Street, Long Ridge areas are less than 4% vacant. So if we were having some major retail problems anywhere within Stamford, you would see these vacancies skyrocketing all over the place. The nice thing with Stamford is we don't have a lot of big box stores. We're primarily mom and pops. In Westport they say mom and moms because a lot of moms get together for that. So we have a very, very healthy market. So we're not overly worried about it. And then when you look at all of the construction that's in the downtown area, we're getting close to 15,000 people per square mile, which is what you need for walkable storefront retailing. So we have about 21 projects just in our transportation pipeline to really upgrade a lot of the downtown and parts within Stamford to make it better. But like I said, when Paul Schott writes his stuff out there, he seems to neglect a lot of the other facts that don't help him with his article.
Okay. Others?
Oh,
No?
come on.
I thought,
He's writing all my transportation stuff down right now.
No, I thought James was going to go for it, but no.
Oh, that was your
All right,
question
well,
too?
Tom, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. All right,
Appreciate it.
thank you.
Nice job. Oh, the train station. I meant to ask you about the train station.
Oh, the train station?
Is
Oh,
there
do you
a
want-
train station coming to Glenbrook or?
No train station to Glenbrook, but we just had a phone call with
Excuse me, everybody.
DOT today about the new proposed parking structure on South State Street. And so they have an empty little lot there, and right now they're proposing a 960 parking space structure on that site. We have a couple other things that are ongoing at the train station I can't talk about yet, but you'll probably see some announcements come out within the next 2 quarters. So,
Thank you.
all right.
Yes. For the city of Norwalk, Jessica Casey.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Hello, everyone. Good evening. I was here last year to speak with you, and I think at that point in time I was 3 weeks in or something like that. So you were my first group of people that I was speaking to, and Lord knows it's been a year and 3 weeks now, and I'm a little bit more comfortable, and I know more about Norwalk, but definitely not everything. But last year when I came to speak with you, I had told you about the City of Norwalk's restructuring and the role that I have at the City of Norwalk as Chief of Economic Community Development. And what that means is I have planning and zoning, building and code enforcement, business development and tourism, transportation, mobility, and parking, all reporting up through this position to the mayor. And I think it speaks to the way in which Norwalk sees economic development and the importance of economic development, and that it's really not just based on jobs and it's not just based on development, but it's really based on people and community and neighborhoods and how the balance of those neighborhoods comes about and what that looks like on the ground and what that means for being able to provide a solid structure and a solid platform for the way in which we want our community to grow. So last year I had talked to you a little bit about what my observations were of Norwalk, and at that point in time, what I had said was that I think Norwalk has a 4-step structure for economic development and community development, and I feel even more strongly about that now, standing in front of you. And so I want to kind of walk through what those 4 steps are and what Norwalk has done in the last year and how they fall under those 4 steps. So the 4 steps are identifying where we want to grow, The second step is being able to create prompt and predictable zoning in those areas. The third is creating investment or establishing investment from a municipality standpoint in those areas to establish growth. And then the fourth is marketing. So in the last year, we've identified that, and Norwalk's always done this, right? But this is more me coming into this role. So we want strong neighborhoods and we want to enhance the quality of life. And we believe that the community is based on the people who live in the community. And that when we attract talent and we retain talent, then the businesses follow. So we want to be able to identify places where people would like to live. So strong neighborhoods, that means urban core, village centers, corridors with activities, it means transit nodes, and it really is focused on being able to, again, establish that balance. But the way in which we've done that over the last year is that we were able to approve the Plan of Conservation Development, the POCD. We actually did some work through the redevelopment agency. We built a redevelopment plan for Wall Street West Ave. And so we've identified where we want to grow around the transit districts and really the urban core. And so the second step is creating that zoning or creating the prompt and predictable piece where we want to know that people know that we want to grow there and that we've established a good pathway for them to grow. We actually, in May 2019, passed that redevelopment plan. But we went in after that and we updated the zoning. And we updated the zoning for the same geography for the Wall Street West Ave area. And we got that approved in June. And what that does is increases the developable area by 60% and increases residential development by 40%. And again, it's not across the whole city, but we've identified where we want to grow. And so we've looked at specific geography in the specific areas to be able to designate those as growth areas. The other thing is that we've identified the opportunity zones. So we have 3 opportunity zones, but they overlay with the Wall Street West Ave and Sono area, along with enterprise zones and along with other types of tools, economic development tools. But again, these aren't just economic development tools in the sense of jobs and development. It's thinking about it more holistically than that. So when we say that we want to hit the third step, which is creating and investing, what does that mean? The investing piece is really important. So from our standpoint, and why this role is so exciting, is because I get to look at it from all of these different angles and work with all of these different teams to be able to think about it. From a building and code standpoint, the city's invested in a neighborhood improvement team. That team is focused on blight. It's also focused on graffiti. It's focused on streetscape improvements. We've been able to close more than 200 customer complaints or customer requests since July 1st. And we've been able to close 37 cases of blight. And that may not seem like a lot, but at the same time, we have a coordinated team that we brought together, and we're working really closely with the redevelopment agency to be able to understand how those CDBG dollars and how the HUD dollars actually align. So when we go through the budget process at this point, it's not one team sitting down and actually asking for money. It's all of the teams getting together, figuring out what portion from which budget could be allocated, and asking for more of a coordinated budget. We are looking at expanding the enterprise zone. And I think that that's probably really unique in the sense that the state has stopped funding the enterprise zone. And so why is Norwalk doing that? Well, we're doing that because we have an area, Wall Street West Ave, that needs investment and it needs a catalyst for growth. And it doesn't mean that the enterprise zone will exist forever, right? It means that we need something to be able to leverage growth there. Since 2007, Norwalk has had a handful of enterprise zone projects approved. And what's interesting about that is that, and it doesn't include the Sono collection, but what's interesting about that is that we have $6.7 million in new revenue coming onto the grant list, even while having the tax abatement in place. We've given about $1.5 million in tax relief, but that's for a 7-year period, and that decreases over time. So where we've seen that we have the tax abatement for $1.5 million, we're actually getting almost 6 times more, 5 times more that in the revenue bucket right away. And we know that within 7 years that will be 100%. We're also looking at a TIF for the Wall Street West Ave area. And so that's something that we brought through our planning committee, and we've asked for funds for the FY21 budget to be able to work with the community to identify what the goals are. And the way that a TIF works is that instead of the taxes going into the general fund, they go into a TIF. And they go into a TIF fund for a special district. But that special district uses that fund to be able to pay down some infrastructure, pay down streetscape improvements, or pay down improvements for that specific area. In November, we announced a small business and Main Street program. And we did that because we went around and we talked to more than 100 businesses in Norwalk as our first year on the ground, first 6 months on the ground, I would say. This is since July the 1st. And we said, what do you need and how do you need it? And a lot of people said, well, we need to do improvements, but we don't own the building and we don't own the real estate. And we're not really willing to make the investment in the streetscape or in the storefront when we don't own that. So what we did in November is we announced a streetscape program that's focused on Wall Street West Ave. We announced a storefront improvement program that's a match program, so the store owner or the person who's leasing the space would make an investment and the city would match that. We made an investment in receptacles that are big belly receptacles because in some of our main corridor areas we didn't have garbage cans, so we wanted to clean that up. And made investments in street trees, which again, I know may sound not so fancy as some of the other things that we're hearing about, but at the same time, when we look back at our strategy and we know we want to enhance neighborhoods and make strong community, and we want to attract and retain people, that's what we're talking about. Some of the other improvements that we made was we launched Wheels to You, which is a microtransit. It's a little shuttle that actually works off of an Uber-like or Lyft-like app. So right now it's been completely subsidized, and we're looking at expanding the area for that, expanding the times it's available, and charging potentially $2 per ride, but that hasn't been solidified yet. We've also installed a number of adaptive signals, especially around the Sono Collection Mall, where there was a lot of worry about transportation. We're talking about expanding the trail system. We're proposing a library expansion of 24,000 square feet. And we're investing in public art. So again, I mentioned these things to you as ways in which the municipality is investing in the neighborhoods and in the neighboring core and in the village centers around the transit districts to be able to establish that enhanced quality of life and be able to retain the people. And Thomas spoke about something really important, and that's all of the folks that are graduating here in Connecticut. And we know that a lot of people are leaving. So when we think about it, we think, okay, how are we retaining those people? We know in Norwalk that we spend $225,000 on each student putting them through the Norwalk school system, and that's a shared cost, right? That's a community cost. But then they're going away to school and they're not coming back to Norwalk. They're not coming back because they don't have the opportunity to live in Norwalk. And I would always joke, I would say, no one wants their 30-year-old son or daughter living in their basement. Their son or daughter does not want that, and probably the parents don't want that either. So when we think about establishing these neighborhoods, how do we know that they're working, and how are we marketing them? Well, for the first time ever, because all of these departments have been brought together, we have the ability to develop market plans, marketing materials, and marketing promotional materials for all of the folks in which we're talking about. And that's business, but it's also schools, and it's letting people know that we have access to housing that's affordable, and we have transportation, and being able to really share all of that in a wider way. So Thomas also talked to you about Fairfield 5, and that's a marketing promotional exercise as well, right? So being able to have the budget, the economic development and community development budget, and being able to look at it from all of these different perspectives has really allowed us to think a little bit differently about economic and community development and share the cost across the departments. So is it working? Well, we know that we anticipate about $3.8 million in revenue through the Building and Code Department for fiscal year 20, and already we're over $2.5 million. So we know that there's a ton of growth going on. The Residence Inn opened up in June, and it has 101 rooms. We have Sono Collection, which just opened, 700,000 square feet of retail, 1,500 jobs, partnerships with the Norwalk Community College, helping to fund the Wheels to You, that microtransit program. What's interesting about that is that prior to the Sono Collection being there, those properties were assessed at $9 million. Today, they're assessed at $45 million. They are expected to be assessed at more than $400 million. So again, that's one of those opportunities where we knew where we wanted to grow. We were able to use the tools that were there, like the enterprise zone, and be able to market it and make a difference. Washington Village is where the federal housing used to be. Phase 2 is coming to completion. Phase 3 funding is in place. That's 273 units of residential, 121, 123 Water Street. We have 195 units going into the East Avenue train station. We have the Sono train station with more than 100 units. The Curb has more than 1,000 units. What's interesting is that when we think about this, all of these are walking distance to the train. We've identified we want to grow by the train. That's where we're focused. That's where our tools are most useful. And that's where we know people who we would have the skill set, where they would like to live. So that's where the focus is. So, not to bore you with stats here, but is it working? Well, when we look at it, we know that the budget last year for Norwalk was $354 million. Today it's $367 million. The grand list was $12 billion. Today, $14. The mill rate was $26.60. It's dropped. For FY20, it's $23.32. For businesses, we had 390 businesses register last fiscal year, and we're already up to 214 this fiscal year, with an anticipated 428. But I think more than that, what we've seen is that Norwalk has been given a AAA bond rating by Fitch and Moody's and S&P, and that's something that we're very proud of. We've been able to refinance all of our bonds at a much lower rate, and so we're paying those down in a quicker way. But I think what it looks like is that, and what economic community development means for us, is the way in which that city is restructured and the way in which Norwalk is looking at itself. So it really is about enhancing neighborhoods, and it's about enhancing neighborhoods through talking to the community, through talking to the business, answering what they need and how they need it. That doesn't mean that we hear everybody all of the time, but it means that we're able to be responsive in a way that I don't think the city has necessarily been structured before to be able to do. So all in all, strategy seems to be working. I hope I get to update you next year with all good news. And thank you very much. Really enjoyed speaking with you.
Thank you, Jessica.
Sure.
Do we have, yes, Jim. Jim Cameron.
Thank you very much for the update. I was very saddened to see that the Garden Cinema closed. Mm-hmm. I'm curious about what's going to happen with the Tyvek Tower, which is still in a state of construction or non-construction. And what does the prospect look of reviving the old Wall Street train station on the Danbury branch?
Got it. So 3 questions. Let's take them from the top. The Garden Cinema is an interesting story, and I think one in which we've talked for a while with Richard Freeman, and we've known that he's been thinking about closing. He did close his location in Stamford. What we learned was that he was choosing to close all of his locations, and that regardless of, we had received information that regardless of the project moving forward or not, Wall Street Place, that he would have plans to sell that. So when we talk with the Wall Street Place project, which is also known as POCO or has been referred to as the the other name that I won't use, I'll just say Wall Street Place, that there were two things that the community wanted to see improvements on. And one of those was the facade of the building, the design of the building, to fit more in with the historical character of the neighborhood. And the second was an arts component. And the arts component, I think, was in direct response to the Garden Cinema, and also the fact that Wall Street West Ave, to many, is known as an art and culture area, an urban center that focuses on that. So when we look at the Wall Street Place, it's still in planning. The last time that we spoke about it at the Common Council was July, at which point in time Citibank and the McCletchie Group were asked to go back and look at the facade and look at the arts component. And my understanding is that they've continued to do that, and that there are a few items that need to be negotiated between the city and Citibank and the McCletchies themselves. But at the same time, that will take time to work through. So I know the city is very committed to being able to complete that project. I know it's been on the books, and it's been, people have been working on it for a very long time. I would say that we're all committed to doing that, and it's a complex project, but at the same time, it's absolutely key to being able to help Wall Street and West Ave move forward. Train station, you got it, the third one. So the state had a bond bill for there was a bond bill for $250,000 at the state, and the Department of Transportation received that $250,000, and that was to look at establishing a node, a transit stop, rail stop on the Danbury line at Wall Street. My understanding is that there used to be a station there, and they closed the station. So our understanding is that they amended one of the contracts that they have in place with the Department of Transportation, and that they are working with the consultant to be able to do a feasibility study on being able to understand if opening that train station is feasible or not. So we don't really know what the timing of that will be. I know the transportation bill has taken a lot of attention over the last number of months. So the latest update we have is that that contract has been amended, and that we'll get an update on when that study will start. You're welcome.
Others? Thank you, Jessica.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks for coming by. It's really great. Next item is a nomination to the Blight Commission. We recommend on to the Board of Selectmen, who actually appoints them. So is there someone who might have a nomination? Clara Sartori. Is there any chance you would have a nomination for this?
I'd like to nominate Michael Casalo for the recommendation to the Blight Committee.
Oh, thank you. Is there a second? Second. All in favor? I can ask if there are others. Are there others? Okay, excuse me for that. All in favor? I see it's unanimous. Thank you. The next item is 20-1, consideration and action on the newly negotiated contract between the Darien Board of Education and the Darien Education Association. And reporting on that is Mrs. Sartori for the Education Committee.
Good evening. I'm Clara Sartori. I'm chairman of the RTM Education Committee. I'd like to have a motion to waive the reading of the resolution. So moved. Okay, second. Okay, all in favor? Okay. The RTM Education Committee met on Thursday, January 23rd, with 10 of 13 members present to review the contract for 2020 to 2023 between the Darien Board of Education and the Darien Education Association. Board of Education Chairman Tara Achman, Superintendent Dr. Alan Adley, Director of Human Resources Marge Sayan, and Director of Finance Richard Rudel attended the meeting to present the salient points of the contract and answer some questions. The contract covers a 3-year period July 1st, 2020 to June 30th, 2023. The salary grid for all Connecticut teachers includes a general wage increase, GWI, and a step increment based on years of the teacher's experience. The GWI increase will be 0.50% for teachers at step 3 through 18 and 1.50% for teachers in step 19 in each of the 3 years of the contract. It's important to note that in a comparison with other towns in our DRG, District Reference Group, all of which have step movements, Darien has the lowest percentage of teachers at the top step, with 28%, compared to Wilton at 67%. Darien also has the lowest average teacher salary. The settlement based on the teacher experience grid over 3 years is 10.93%. The cumulative $4,719,265 breaks down as follows. In year 1, $1,544,827, or 3.71%. In year 2, $1,568,271, or 3.63%. Year 3, $1,606,170, or 3.9%. However, the total cost for the steps may actually be lower, as new teachers hired during the duration of the contract may be placed on a lower step than their predecessor. Also, an important consideration in analyzing the above numbers is that this year the negotiations included a change in middle and high school teacher workload. Under this new contract, 120 teachers at Middlesex and Darien High School will be expected to teach 5 classes per day rather than the current 4.5 classes. As a result, the true teacher experience grid settlement to the town is 9.59%, or $4,087,975. A savings of $631,290 will be realized over 3 years. Additionally, the increase in teacher workload from the above change results in an immediate reduction of 2.09 FTEs effective in 2020 and a savings of $204,421 in the first year. In looking at the future, the increase in teacher workload from 4.5 to 5 through attrition puts the district in line to save more than $688,000 through a reduction in future FTE positions. In terms of health care, there's been no change to the current premium cost or plan design. Darien teachers pay a premium cost share of 21% for health coverage, the highest in the DRG. The Education Committee expressed concern about the projected cost for health insurance in the coming year's budget. The major reasons for the Education Committee's support of this contract are as follows. The contract was finalized after lengthy and productive negotiations between the representatives of the two parties. The contract is a result of long-term strategic thinking that will promote outstanding student learning outcomes. The contract will allow Darien to be competitive in recruiting the best teachers. It represents a good faith effort which is respectful to the teachers and will benefit the students. It's fiscally responsible to the taxpayers and fair to the teachers, and support for this contract will send a powerful message to the staff about the value that Darien places on education. The Education Committee voted unanimously not to reject the contract between the Darien Board of Education and the Darien Education Association, and we recommend that the RTM do the same. Thank you. Okay. Okay, can I move the item and get a second? Okay, good. Thank you.
You may have noticed that this resolution is a little different from what we normally encounter here. We don't normally move things to reject them. But the teacher, this contract is, has to do with some state wording. And so rather than go into the legalities of it all myself, I would be more than happy to have town council step up briefly and explain what we're doing here.
Good evening. It's really not as complicated as it may seem at first blush. There are different statutes that apply to different contracts. Some say approve it or reject it. This one says specifically, and this for your information is 10-153D of the Connecticut General Statutes, which deals with teachers' contracts, and provides the terms of such contract shall be binding on the legislative body unless such body rejects such contract at a regular or special meeting. That's why we use that word. What makes it a little bit confusing, a yes is a no and a no is a yes. If you want to approve this contract, you vote no. If you want to reject it, you vote yes. Other than that, it's pretty straightforward.
I apologize for that. So, speaking on behalf of the Finance and Budget Committee, Jack Davis.
He just stole one of my lines. I'm Jack Davis, Chairman of the RTM Finance and Budget Committee. The committee discussed this contract at its December 16th, January 6th, and January 16th meetings. At our January 16th meeting, Board of Ed Chairman Tara Achman and Board of Ed member John Cini were present, along with Rich Ruddle and Marjorie Sion, which are the Darien School District's Director of Finance and Operations and Director of Human Resources, respectively. Thank you, Ms. Santori, for your committee's report. I will only try and cover some additional information that was not specifically covered. As was just discussed, I want to remind this body that we are not voting to approve this contract, but rather we are voting not to reject the contract. If we vote to reject the contract, the town and the DEA union will go to arbitration. At that time, both sides will present their respective positions, and the arbitrator will select one from the town side and one from the union side. There is no compromise. Towns such as Darien do not typically do well in arbitration. So in the best spirit of Dr. Seuss, this is a yes means no, and a no means yes. The contract is often referred to as a teacher's contract, but it covers all certified staff, including teachers, school psychologists, social workers, OT, PT professionals. However, it excludes administrators, which we will be dealing with next year. Some key aspects that we're going to cover is salary increases, work change schedule, change in the bachelor grades, healthcare longevity, change in tutoring, additional personal day, and family leave policy. During the State of the Town meeting, it was noted that the teacher's contract resulted in over an 11% increase. While that's technically true, it's a misleading characterization of the contract. As was just mentioned by Ms. Santori, the net settlement is 9.5. But another way to look at this is the blended contract rate. Over the life of this contract, the top tier is only receiving a 1.5% total increase. And the percentage of FTEs at the top tier, assuming no retirements or other turnover, is 28% in the current year, 32% in the first year of the contract, 35% in the second year of the contract, and 39% in the final year of the contract. Using the blended rate, in the first year of the contract, that 3.71% moves to a 3.1%. In the second year, the 3.63% moves to 3%. And in the third year of contract, that 3.59% moves to 2.88% increase. That also does not take into consideration that the school is currently paying $204,000 as a stipend for teachers that are currently teaching 5 classes. They're not getting that. In addition, through typical turnover that I have experienced as the chair of F&B and as vice chair previously, we do have turnover for normal reasons. Retirements, people move, spouses get moved. And so, as Ms. Santori, I keep on wanting to say Clara, but Ms. Santori explained, the replacement is typically at a lesser salary. And so the increases will be significantly less when we look year to year. Change in the work schedule. This was a major, hard-fought win for the district. In the prior contract, we changed Middlesex to go from 4 to 4.5 for certain teachers. I'm not saying that it worked out perfectly, but now requiring 120 teachers to teach 5 classes is basically saying to our teachers, you're going to work 11% more, and I'm giving you a 3% raise. That's how we have to look at what this is. This has major impact to not only what's happening now, but also as we have changes in enrollment, that can be modified depending upon attrition and what subject the attrition occurs in. Change in bachelor grades and movement. This actually was in the last appendix of the contract, and we just talked about it to make sure that people knew we read it. But historically, we have not been competitive with our other districts in our bachelor degrees because they weren't seeing movement in the first 3 years that they were teaching here. This has changed, and it ends up being a win for both the teachers as well as the district. It puts our salary more competitive with our peers, and it means that we're not having good teachers who have started in Darien leaving. Healthcare. Our teachers pay 21%. They've been paying 21% for quite a while. Weston's teachers currently are paying 17.5, 18.5, 19.5. New Canaan, which does its contract a year before us, will not pay 21% until fiscal 22. That's not to say we're the best. Westport will be paying 22% in fiscal year 22, and Ridgefield, who actually started this whole thing on health care by bringing their union to arbitration a number of years ago, will have their teachers paying 23% of their health care costs in 2022, but you're not going to get everything in a contract. Longevity clauses. I'm mentioning this because we don't have any, while some of our other towns, like New Canaan and Ridgefield, do. Change in tutoring. One of the changes that occurred is that there is new language that says that a teacher cannot tutor a student when they're going to have that student in the fall. Just makes sense. Good language. There's an addition that the union requested of 1 additional day, personal day carry forward, so they now have 4 to go. Here's the last one. Non-birth parents and parents of adoption can now take family leave. This is a trend of top employers. It's an important trend, and I can personally state that my son, who works for a major Paris fashion house, took advantage of this, and it was a wonderful thing and significantly helped his family. This makes Darien Board of Education a good employer. The F&B committee at its January 16th meeting, with 12 of 17 members present, unanimously voted not to reject the contract between Darien Board of Education and the DEA union, and recommends the same to the full RTMs. So in other words, and you will rarely ever hear F&B ever say this, in remembering Dr. Seuss, vote no.
Thank you, Jack. Other committees? Members of the RTM? Town officials? Yes, Jim.
Jim Cameron, District 4. I wonder if Mr. Davis would speak further to the tutoring question. I guess my real concern is, and this sounds hypothetical, or maybe it doesn't, if a football coach for Darien High School were to offer private classes over the summer, would that no longer be allowed?
The chairman, well, all right, you want to try that? All right.
I know what I know and I know what I don't know. And so for that, I'm going to ask members of the Board of Ed to give that response.
I had a feeling maybe we were going in that direction. I'll recognize Tara Achman, Chair of the Board of Education. Perfect.
Thank you, everyone, for your reports tonight. To the specific question, Jim, this is on certified teachers specifically. It does not currently apply to coaches. However, this question has been raised by the Board of Ed, and I would expect conversation to continue on it.
Oh, thank you. Other questions? Yes, Jan. Jan Raymond.
I'm not sure whether this is a question for an RTM committee or possibly for Tara. Can you tell us, or someone tell me, what the starting bachelor's degree salary is in Darien today?
Starting BA, we were going to say 47, and it is actually 47,638.
Well, I'm glad they're getting a raise.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Anyone else? I just won't go too far.
I'm almost afraid to say thank you, and but we'll see. Any other questions? Ready to vote? All those in favor, please rise. What? There. Oh, yeah, right. And I don't see any in favor. So those opposed, please rise. That's next. Abstentions? Please. Good. All right, everybody stay in place till we get the count. New members to the RTM, Michael Castello, District 2. Welcome, Michael. Werner Dometer, District 4. Lucy Fiore, and Jan Raymond. Welcome. Welcome back. Yes, yes, yeah. There was no abstentions? Okay. Results of the vote, those in favor, none. Kind of interesting. Those opposed, 75, no abstentions. All those, I'll accept a motion to adjourn. Okay. All those in favor, please rise.